Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games and giant thunder lizards. Solosaurus is sponsored by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Visit them at stonevalleygames.com. And now, here come your hosts, stomping through the underbrush, Michael and Martin.
A little bit of silence. And then...
if you say a little bit of silence, it's not silence, is it?
Yeah, well, it's just reinforcing the silence.
But
that's like a Depeche Mode song, isn't it?
No.
That's where you enjoy it.
Enjoy the silence.
Yeah. Oy vey. All right.
This is like the start of the DVD of This is Spinal Tap.
But it goes to 11.
How black the screen is. No. That's like it's more of a pastel black, really.
I haven't seen that in forever. I got to watch that again.
Such an amazing movie, and we're dating ourselves.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 82 of the Solosaurus podcast. I'm Michael Eckenfels.
And I'm Martin Gonzalez, who hasn't recorded a podcast in so long that I'm not even sure that episode 82 is correct.
No, I think you're right. Maybe?
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. Well, we'll get it right.
Okay.
Well, nah. I'll just say 82. Yeah. It's 82A if there's another 82.
It's 82.
82. We've been remiss in recording in a recording schedule lately for a variety of reasons. I've not been on for a few episodes because I've had personal issues, mainly dealing with health and my mom.
You've been on assignment.
Yeah, a little bit. Besides that, just other things going on, side projects, other work I've had to do. I recently got pulled into a project from a previous employer, and they're hiring me on the side to do some work for them. And I couldn't say no to that, considering what they wanted to throw at me. So
I hope that's good news.
Yeah, it's good news. It's more instructional design. I'm doing 3 modules for an insane amount of money. So it's like, well, I can't really say no to that. So sure, I'll help you guys out. It's going to take up a lot of my personal time, though. But, that's the way it goes. And then on top of that, family. And
yeah, but you're in demand.
Yeah, well, for the moment, we'll see.
I wish I was that in demand in my instructional design job.
I'd love to work where you work, Martin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe not. All right.
With me, it's more like, oh, are you still here? Oh, I guess we should give you something to do, right? Huh?
Like that. You people heard nothing. I said nothing. All right. Yeah, well, it's nice to be in demand anywhere, I guess. And
it's nice to have you back, Michael.
Thank you.
It's good to be back in the podcast saddle. I actually have a podcast saddle. I'm sitting in it right now. Giddy up, little Zencastery.
Where do you order that from? Amazon? I'll have to look that up.
No, you can go to the Zencaster related products page. They've got a podcast saddle for you. It fits right in your office chair. It's great.
Yeah, I think they need to be sponsors of the show too. Then, hey. Speaking of, this podcast is brought to you by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Check them out at stonevalleygames.com or look them up on Facebook under Stone Valley Games. Did you know Stone Valley Games is a veteran-owned small business? Eric, the owner, served for over 25 years in the Army as an air and missile defense warrant officer, with over half that time spent deployed to foreign countries. Eric has always used games to escape the day-to-day realities of his military duties. However, game stores, the few that did ship to overseas military, shipped it very poorly. So Eric vowed that one day, if he opened his own shop, he would focus on getting deployed military, their families, and contractors properly shipped items, and he would do it for free to demonstrate his support for their efforts. That's why the shop has free shipping to AA, AE, and AP addresses, which is pretty cool. And just from the things that he sent us over the last year or so, 2 years, gosh, how long has it been now? We've been doing this for a couple of years now, right?
Yeah, we started around episode 65 and episode 82.
Hey, it's been a while. But regardless, he packs his stuff well.
Who knew? Who knew we would have lasted this long?
Yeah, well, hopefully somebody's listening to this episode and haven't given up on us. I actually had the editor from Armchair Dragoon say, are you guys on hiatus?
Or we've actually been out so long that people, when this episode drops, people would be like, "Oh, a new podcast," and then we'll have a whole bunch of new listeners.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the way to look at it.
We can dream. We can
totally dream. Well, I'll tell you what,
Yes.
Martin, how would you
Yes.
like to talk about what you've been playing lately?
I would love to talk about what you've been playing lately. I think you've been playing a lot more than I have. You've been extremely
I've
active on the game acquisition front.
yeah, I've been collecting. So I had a busy summer for a
Mm-hmm.
variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I had an anniversary with which I got Nemesis,
Mm.
and then I had a birthday where I got Excavation Earth and Lost Ruins of Arnak,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went
Yeah.
a little crazy with the purchases.
What do you mean? Those three weren't crazy already?
Yeah, tell me about it.
I mean,
I've got
those are Nemesis is a huge game. Excavation Earth is
yes,
a big solo game.
yes.
Arnak, I love Arnak. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet. That's the
Oh.
I told you about this already. When I opened the box, some of the
Oh,
components were damaged.
right.
They're all wrinkled up, and I sent you a picture, and I'm like,
Oh,
"What the heck?" It's like somebody just threw them
no.
in there. The box is fine, everything else is
Yeah.
fine, but that was all messed up. And
That's so
but
surprising.
to check, what's the name of the company? Check
Check
Games CGE.
Games CGE. Yes.
Yes. So to their credit, though, they replied to me almost immediately and said they would send me replacements. And
Oh, great.
when I contacted them, so take a couple of weeks to ship over here. But hey, that was nice. So I'm very pleased with that. But the thing is, I can't really play it until I get. I'm just weird
Right.
like that. If it's messed
Mm.
up, I'm like, I'm not touching this. I'm going to wait until I get
Yeah.
it. So that was disappointing because I actually was getting it out on the table and I was going to play it, and I was like, oh man, seriously? Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. A bunch of war games that nobody listening to this is really going to care about, probably. Like one called
on.
Battle. Huh?
No, I'm pretty sure we have a lot of war game
Okay.
listeners. Yeah.
Well, probably. I guess if the
I mean,
Unplayed Games audience
David
is listening.
Thompson himself.
That's
is
true. That's true.
He
Yes.
is an avid listener, and he gives us feedback all the time. And I think he listens
Yes.
to the show while he's running.
He did send me a copy of Soldiers and Postmen's uniforms for
What?
review.
He
Yeah.
didn't
Well,
send
I got
me a
that.
copy.
I got that
What?
for Armchair Dragoons. I'm sure he'd be happy to send you a copy. We could talk about it on the show because I've already played it, and it's
Okay.
pretty good. So
but let's wait until after I've played
yes,
Undaunted.
let's
because-
do that. Oh, Undaunted. So some of the games: Battle of Stalingrad, Heroes of Stalingrad. Notice a pattern there.
There's a theme there.
I got Marvel United. I got Pan Am.
Okay.
A game called Soviet Dawn. Another one called No Motherland Without. I did get Back to the Future, Back in Time.
All right.
France 1944. And there's a few others, but I'll just leave it at that because
So a nice spread of like kind of boutique war games, hardcore war games, and then
Yep.
kind of retail kind of games you can find at Target.
yeah.
Yeah, I've actually played Marvel United. It's not it's a decent game. It's very light. It's very rules straightforward, which I appreciate. But have you played it, by the way?
Not yet. I have
Okay.
opened the box though, so that's progress.
But it's a co-op game, and it's a co-op beat 'em up. It's great for like young kids, especially like you just want to have a good time with young kids and not take too long. It's great for that. But if you're playing solo, it does have what's called the Shield True Solo mode, and that is significantly harder. Like I can imagine Eric Lang designing this game and saying, "Okay, you think we're giving you a kiddie game? Think again."
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So it's a good time. It's a good time.
So that's
Very
been
light,
it.
yeah.
That's been it. I've got a game called Stalingrad Solitaire on my table right now. Yeah, that's the third Stalingrad game I've mentioned. And you might notice a pattern because I don't know, that battle fascinates me. It's kind of a mess when it comes to actual battles. If anybody's ever reads the history of it, it's a fascinating read. Anyway, without going on to an entire podcast talking about that, it's a fascinating subject to me. So it's one of my favorite topics. Other than that, what else did I play? Let me see. I did play. Well, I don't see it, so I've forgotten. Never mind.
Well, you played the game. You played the game that we're going to be reviewing in this episode.
Yes, I have, and I almost mentioned that. I'm like, I think I'll just wait a second. I like it's a big surprise because if you've seen the title, you know it's Alien: Fate of the Nostromo.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody; it's a secret.
We'll talk a lot more about that later on
Yes,
in the show.
Absolutely. So, how about you, Martin? Surely you've been playing
I
something.
have not been playing nearly as much as you, nor acquiring nearly as much as you.
I don't think anybody does with me. I don't know why I'm like this. I really don't. I
I
really
mean,
don't.
I'm not judging. I've gone through phases where it's just like sale after sale after
Yes.
this after that after this, and then on top of that, it's just folks sending us stuff for review and all this stuff. But let's see. What have I been playing lately? I'm looking at my BG Stats app right now. I mean, bucket of honesty. It's really been kind of hard for me to get solo games to the table recently just because of the busyness of life. I'm sure a lot of our listeners can empathize with that. Um, you
Indeed.
know, and in me personally, it usually takes me like the entire day of Saturday just to get all the rules down to a point, and then I'll have to leave it Saturday afternoon or early evening, and then
Hmm.
maybe if I'm lucky by Sunday morning, I feel comfortable enough to play it a couple of times, and then that's it. So it's really just like one solo game per weekend, and then like I see other folks on the Facebook groups, and they're like, "Oh, I played 6 games this weekend," and I'm like, "What? That's ridiculous! That's mind-boggling to me."
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, what have I been playing? So, kind of about a month back, because we've been off the air for a while, I played a couple of small card games, including Jump Drive. So, Jump Drive, if you're not familiar with it, is the kind of easier, lighter, faster playing little sibling of Race for the Galaxy, which is a very famous soloable card game. But basically, who is the designer? Is it Tom Lehman? I want to say it's Tom Lehman. Um, but Jump Drive is like a much faster, easier to get to the table kind of version of that. But the basic gameplay is you're playing cards and then you're trying to figure out combos between them to get your engine going because your cards are going to score you points every turn and then or every round, and then each game, at least in the solo, this is a fan made solo, by the way, that you can find on BGG. The in the box, it doesn't have a solo mode. The fan made solo is kind of like a campaign, and it's actually not bad. And but basically, you play for 7 rounds, and then you see how high you can generate your score. So it's kind of like a engine. It's a card based engine builder. It's a tableau builder engine builder, which is anyone who's listened to me for any length of time knows that I am a complete sucker for tableau building, engine building card games. And it's a deck of cards and some tokens, so it's great like that. And it doesn't take a long time to learn and play. And then right after that, I played, big surprise, another tableau builder engine builder called the Manhattan Project Chain Reaction, which is again a smaller, lighter, faster playing card based younger sibling of a much bigger game called the Manhattan Project Energy Empire, which is one of my top 10 or top 5 games of all time. I love the Manhattan Project theme. I love the milieu. I love the gameplay. But anyway, yeah, Chain Reaction is it's a mini engine builder. It's like each hand you got to figure out what is the best and most optimal way to play each hand, and then you're done. You have to get rid of all your cards at the end of each turn, and then you got a fresh start. So you're just figuring out how to build a mini engine with each hand. The last game and the most recent game that I played, this was last week, is called Neom, Neom, which is a city building tile laying game, which hits a lot of notes for me. I have always been a big fan of the game SimCity, and we're talking the original SimCity on the NES. Um,
Right.
and this is kind of like you're drafting tiles to lay down in your city, which is a grid, and then but there are rules on how you can place the tiles. They have roads printed on them, so they have to like connect. You can't just like lay down a tile where the roads don't connect because that doesn't make sense, quote unquote. And then every tile has an effect, and then will well, okay, you've got residential tiles, you've got commercial tiles. So residential tiles earn you victory points. Commercial tiles generate money for you, basically, both instantly and at the end of every generation or round. And then you've got your industrial tiles that generate resources for you, but also pollution. So, it's the same kind of things that you think about when you're playing a city building game. Like, you don't want to build a residential area beside an industrial area because of the pollution. Is going to give you negative points of those types of things. So I don't know. I played that one again and again and again. This is a native solo mode. It's really good. It's really restful. And so basically the theme here is I've been playing some super light, super calming games the past couple of months because that's really all I can handle right now, Michael, to be honest.
I understand. Just think of the EuroGames Rulebook and struggling with that as opposed to Wargaming Rulebook and struggling with that. So I understand the frustration there. And that's my biggest thing. It's like I love to have these games on my shelf, and I love the potential in them, and I think that's what it's all about is potential. But then it's like when I have the time, I'll play it, and that biggest hurdle is that damn rulebook. And when I have time, it's Saturday, and then maybe I'll have it set up Sunday, but by then I'll be, I don't want to play this anymore, and it'll be something else. I don't know.
Yeah.
No matter what the game is, Euro war game doesn't matter. Same thing.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't know. I mean, the further I get into this hobby, you would think the easier it gets to learn games. You know what I mean? No,
yeah,
it's the opposite, right? It's like,
Yep.
I don't know. It's taking me longer, and I get more, I don't know, burned out a little bit, I guess. Not that I don't want to play games, or not that I'm like, wanting to just like take my entire collection and then, bury them in a big pit in the backyard.
Yeah,
I would never do that.
Right.
Although I will say that since I transitioned to primarily solo gaming, I took most, if not all, of my purely multiplayer games and I hid them in the shed in the backyard. They're all hidden there. And so when my son, says, "Hey, Dad, can we look through your games and maybe my girlfriend and I will borrow a couple and play at a party?" I'm like, "Yeah, go to the shed."
The cast-offs. The stepchildren.
They're not soloable. Your Betrayal is House on the Hill, and your Carcassonne, and they're all.
Oh yeah. Some games you just can't play solo, man. I think any game you can play solo if you're motivated enough. No matter how many players it says you have to have, I think you can do it if you really want to get over that little stigma. But just some of them are just require so much brain effort, like Betrayal at House on the Hill. How do you play a traitor solo without a game system to do it? And I'm sure there's a BGG a file or method to do it, but still, it's like, oh gosh, I got to think.
How do you betray yourself?
Right. Well,
you have to knock yourself on the head with a hammer between turns and hope you forget.
just think of what your board games on the shelf that have been unplayed feel when you buy a new one. When you go click that buy now.
Oh, you had to bring that.
That is the betrayal. Well, dude, it's here too, man. I mean, shoot. And it's funny you talked about not having the energy or how things have changed for you, even in the short time you've been a board gamer. It's kind of impacted me that way. I don't know if this is a good time to talk about.
That's fine.
This whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, we said we would talk about whatever.
Right. Okay. Well, it's a good segue because as soon as you said that, I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So with me, it's been, of course, I've been gaming forever, but my real impact has been in journalism, in gaming journalism, and having written articles and AARs, which are playthrough or session reports, I guess you could call them, instead of games. And that over 20 plus years has really shaped my perception of board games. So instead of looking at a game as something that I would get enjoyment out of, or just going to play it and have fun, it's become more of a, how can I turn this into a review? How can I turn this into a story that I can tell an audience?
Yeah.
And that colors your perception, and it makes games a work.
Yep.
Sometimes not a work, but work. Sometimes, more than they should be. And I think that my brain has been very literal because I started with the war games, and war games are very well, they're still vague, but they are particular about some things, like a distance within a area and the
Mhm.
size of a unit and the number of weapons something has or the objectives, that kind of a thing. And that's always spoken to me because you can tell a story that way. And most of the books I've read are nonfiction, talking about battles, things like that. It's really easy to perceive it. But then when you get into something like a Euro game or an engine building game or something like that, you get parts that are not specific. Like I'm just thinking of Architects of the West Kingdom for some reason. You've got,
Okay.
or even Catan, say you've got stone, you've got wood. That makes perfect sense to a normal gamer, but to me, it's like, what? How much stone is that? How does that equate? And that kind of a thing. And I think that's where a lot of my problems with Euro games as Lane is just not
Yeah.
perceiving it and not being. How do I tell this as a story? And once I
Right.
realized that very recently, I was like, huh, that's been my hang up. It's not really about that. I should just play the game and enjoy it for what it is and not judge it that way. Try to put other games functionality onto something like this, because it's like, well, I got 3 wood for your 2 stone or whatever. It's like, well, that just, how do you literally just transcribe that in a story? And it's like, well, I guess you just say
Gotcha.
it the way it is. It makes more sense that way. And for me, it's
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
I've become more interested in Euro games. And just to mention, I don't really like labels like Ameritrash or Euro games, things like that. I know that some people say that's just that, that's just that. I don't like pigeonholing games that way because I know war
Hmm.
gamers are like that. Some will say Access and Allies is not a war game. Memoir 44 is not a war game.
Right.
To me, they are. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
if it is to you, if it's a Euro game to you, it's a Euro game. If it's a war game, it's a war game. So it doesn't matter. But I just don't like the definitive pigeonholing kind of a thing. That's an Ameritrash game. I don't even know what Ameritrash is, to be honest with you. And I've been in games since the late '70s, so I don't know no clue what that means. maybe,
Yeah. No,
maybe
I
that's just
understand.
my Clint Eastwood Gran Torino look. You damn hippie kids in their trashy games, and
Well,
anyway, yeah. So
no, thank you for sharing that. I get that. I just was figuring when we review these things in the past, there was a string of worker placement that you could label as categorized as Euro that we reviewed in the past. Architects was one of them. Architects of the West Kingdom, and I remember you kind of like showing a pattern of it doesn't really grab me, and I was just figuring, well, that's just not your style of game, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But the added insight of you're constantly trying to weave a story in your head which is connected to because I want to write a AAR or a review of this or just maybe a session report like on
right,
Archer Dragoons or whatever. Like that makes a lot of sense. And so that becomes your pattern. And then and because the games that you habitually have been playing kind of just support that pattern, then it's fine. It's like it's very natural. But then when you start playing different games that are kind of higher level or more streamlined, if you will, then I get it. It's harder to put a story to it. There's this weird suspension of disbelief, especially for me. I started out as a super thematic, story driven gamer because as you pointed out, I've only come to this hobby fairly recently. Like I first picked up a modern tabletop game in 2017. Prior to that, we'd have to go back to my college days when I was playing role playing games, tabletop role playing, pen and paper games like Dungeons
right,
and Dragons and
right,
Call of Cthulhu and whatnot. And those were all obviously story driven, dice driven. That was gaming to me at the time. And so when I got back into it, that's the void that I was looking to fill, if you will. So my first games were Eldritch Horror and Aeon's End, and so very kind of highly thematic, where you could easily just immerse yourself in the story and the theme and the milieu and with the whatever. And I didn't look at kind of cube pushing, no randomization, no dice games, which are kind of like the hallmarks of a Euro. If I'm doing air quotes right now, if you can't hear it, but because I agree with you, like sometimes it's kind of silly to label or classify games this way. They're just games, and Either you
Right.
like them or you don't, right? But
Exactly. Yes.
that said, I have seen, I have sensed, I have detected several kind of qualities of a quote unquote Euro. Very low randomness, generally no dice, or if there are dice, they're not used in the kind of skill test. You got to roll in a 5 or a 6 to succeed. Kind of very, very familiar, kind of like Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror kind of thing. Um, those games require a certain level of suspension of disbelief, because they're
Right.
more, to me, and people listening to this might disagree, but this is how I feel about it. To me, they're more mechanics driven. You know what I mean? Like the people who design the geniuses who design these games are very good at like figuring out interesting mechanisms, and they're good at figuring out the underlying math, which I suck at, by the way. And then they can figure out, well, how does this then fit into a theme, a milieu, or whatever. But there are many people in our hobby who are like, theme is unimportant to me. I just like the mechanic. They just like figuring out the mechanisms, and that's fine. So that's a totally valid way to engage in our hobby. It just doesn't work for me. I need theme, and I think you do too. But
Yeah.
we come at it from kind of different angles. Like, you need the kind of historical kind of war game kind of, you know, whereas I've kind of gravitated more to the Cthulhu or zombies or you know uh,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
boss battle, video game related, whatever. But either way, um, yeah, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and I'm also a late comer to quote unquote Euro games, and I have recently started to appreciate them for what they are in my own way. But even if you look at the Euro games that I really like, they have more kind of thematic connection than not, if you will, like Lost Ruins of Arnak, which you haven't played yet.
Right. But I will.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of game that you would look at and say, Michael's not going to like that. But I've looked at it and I've watched videos and it just appealed to me. And maybe it's the Raiders of the Lost Ark vibe that it has. And
Yeah.
I have just good memories of that. And I'm like, that. And once I realized what I just confessed, and not like a confession, but, it became, hey, this is something I can do and I can enjoy. And I don't necessarily have to write something about it. I can just put it on the table and have a darn good time and then put it away for next time,
Yeah.
And that's like a liberating thought. I just got to stick with it now and then.
It's interesting how this is kind of like a new thing that you're coming to.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, Arnak is like one of those games I've gotten it to the table several times, which is already strange, right? Because
Hey.
like you, I have a very significant shelf of unplayed games. I'm sure many of us in the solo hobby have, are very familiar with that. And I'm not even going to mention how many unplayed games. It will probably take your breath away. But despite that, Arnak, it keeps coming back because it's very calming. It's very restful. The way that its game flow is just super meditative for me. It's like you put your thing here and you get this thing, but then you could convert that to this other thing, and then you could like parlay that into, and then all of a sudden you're thinking at the start of your turn, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna place a couple of meeples and then that'll be it, and then you're like 12 moves in and you feel like you're wheeling and dealing and you're like, wow, how did that happen? And it all just kind of emerged out of just like one thing coming after the other. There's just something super calming and restful and meditative and slightly brain tickling. Not brain burning. I hate brain burning games. I like brain tickling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
I think too that it comes down to some games just having perceivable components. And I don't know if, let's see if I can think of a game that makes sense here. So some games are just far too abstract for me.
Yeah.
Is Azul a good example of that? Have you played that?
I own it. I wasn't interested in it before because it doesn't have a native solo mode. But
okay. All right.
Mark Outen at Duke Fan Blue 2005 on BGG, and I'm amazed that I remember his BGG handle.
Nice.
He is a very accomplished maker of great fan made solo modes, and he's come out with a solo mode for Azul. And so when I saw that Mark had done that, I bought a copy. as cheaply as I could find, because you and I are both, misers when it comes to, we just like the deals. We just like the deals.
Yes.
But I haven't gotten it. I mean, I've opened it, and the tiles are very tactile. They get it? They're very tactile. There's a pun there. Yeah. But I haven't played it yet. Long story short, have you played it?
No, I'm not meaning to call it out in particular. I'm trying to think of games that are very abstract and have very abstract components. That usually doesn't appeal to me at all. It's just like I can't perceive it. Like Lost Ruins of Arnak, at least I can say, okay, this is an expedition. That makes sense. Let's see what else. Back to the Future, Back in Time. I mean, there's a point to that. It makes sense. You've got Hill Valley, you got the little characters, you got the car, you got everything. So that makes sense. But something that's just vague and general, I don't know. I have issues with them still, but I'm trying to appreciate all games for what they are and not pigeonhole it myself. Like I said before, I don't like pigeonholing games, so I don't want to say, oh, that's one of those games. One of those games. I don't want to play that. I want to keep myself open to it. If it's a solo game, it's got a solo mode, or if it's good enough to multi-hand it, then I will give it a try. And I think that's my new perspective.
I totally get it. And by the way, speaking about like abstract components, I totally get that too. I used to be the kind of person who was like, I wouldn't bother upgrading my components into deluxe components. Like, what's the difference? What's the difference if you're playing a game with cardboard coins or metal coins? There's no difference. There's still coins. You know what I mean? That's how I used to feel. For people who are listening, who are starting to get offended, hang on, stay with me here. So there's this game, there's this quote unquote Euro game called Grand Austria Hotel, where you are running a hotel in Austria. In the early 1900s. It's all very like dignified and whatever. And part of the game is you get to serve food from your kitchen to your guests who come and eat in your cafe. And they have strudel, and they have pie, and they have wine, and there's 4 things. And they're represented in the base game by cubes. So the strudel is a brown cube, and the pie is a pink cube, and the wine is they're just cubes, and that was hard, very abstract, like you said. And so I actually went, and I couldn't believe it was me who was doing this. I went on Etsy, and I found somebody who had 3D printed actual like little tiny strudels and tiny pies and tiny wine and tiny coffee cups. And I'm not going to tell you how much I spent, $28. And it was $3 shipping. It was great. And now I feel a lot more motivated to play this game, because instead of like a brown cube, I can actually serve strudel onto the table in the cafe. And it makes a big difference, actually. Because connected to the thematic kind of connection that you're talking about,
Right, exactly. I mean, if your brain can latch onto it, there's something satisfying about how the pieces interact with the game itself. And if it's something 3D that's printed like a piece of pie that you're serving a guest, that makes a lot of sense. Or like a game like Outer Rim, for example, where you've got the little credit cardboard tokens. I think somebody 3D printed some really nice money tokens, and I almost pulled the trigger on that, but I haven't done that yet. I think you posted. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to. My friend Dave Intner, who's very popular, who's very active in the solo. He's got I think he has an Etsy store, and I think that he sent me. I think it was Dave or Oscar Valera, one of the two. Very, very nice, very prominent people and active people in the solo gaming groups, and they sent me 3D printed credits. It was great. It was awesome. Thank you, Dave and Oscar. I think it was Oscar now that I think about it, but both of those gentlemen have sent me things in the past, and they're awesome.
Cool. Very cool. I'm friends with Dave. I'm going to have to get in there and see if I can get that to happen for me. I'll check out his store at least and see how that works. That would be kind of cool. I've just never partaken of it, and I think you almost made me pull the trigger on the Scythe upgraded bits. I remember you said it was on sale. Remember you posted about it, and I was like,
the coins, the Scythe metal coins. Which I actually didn't pull the trigger on that deal, but I made my own quote unquote metal coins out of cardboard. wrap your head around this one. I took the images of the metal coins, I put them in my Photoshop, and I cleaned them up, and then I put them in my Cricut cutting machine, and I made cardboard versions of the metal coins.
Well, there you go.
And they don't satisfy me at all. They don't even
Yeah.
satisfy me, but I can pretend that I have metal coins.
There you go. It's just not the same. But
It's not the same.
you being the P&P guru that you are, I imagine it is. I mean, for me, I screw it up. It gets misaligned, and I just doesn't come out the way I perceived it, and it ends up just. I would rather just shell out the cash for the actual board game version rather than the print and play. Though I do have some print and play war games. I've not really divin. I've not really dived. That's a better word, into that kind of thing. But yeah, I love the Etsy store though. I checking those out sometimes. I'll go through all of them. That's how I got my dice tower, was through Etsy. So I'm pretty happy.
Isn't
with that.
isn't there a website that provides a whole bunch of really deep like print and play war games? I'm trying to think of the website.
Yeah, it's called Wargamer. Wargame Vault.
Wargame Vault is one, but there's one in particular that I'm thinking of, and maybe we can circle back around.
Maybe there's also Drive Through RPG.
Is Spiel in the name or something Spiel?
No, I don't know.
Anyway, all right,
that would be interesting to find out.
I'll get back to you on that. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, do you want to talk about news now? About games out there?
We've been off on hiatus for quite a while, so there's quite a bit of pent-up news here.
Yes. You know what? I didn't mention this in the pre-show to you, and it's one I want to talk about really quick, if you want to look it up really quick. If you go to GameFound and type 11 Football Manager.
Oh, yeah. I've heard
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So I wanted to bring this one up, not because I'm getting a free copy or anything. I'm not. It's something I've kind of debated whether I want to get. I am not a soccer fan, football fan, I should say, to some of you guys listening. But there's something about, this soccer sport is very much to me like, say, golf or tennis. It's got to be one of the most boring things on the planet to watch, but to play, it's freaking awesome. And there's also a difference too, depending on where you are. Like, for example, when I was in Scotland a couple of times a few years back, watching it there with the locals is a heck of a lot more fun than watching it by yourself on your couch at home. It's a lot more interactive. But this particular game, 11, it's got some really cool components to it, and it's a football management board game, or football manager board game. Right. I watched a video. Rado runs through it, had a preview copy, and it looked great. I mean, it looked really wonderful. And I think one of the things about Premier League soccer that is the European stuff that really impresses me is there's 7 or 8 levels of leagues, and technically you can be in this low level playing in the mud with 30 people watching in the metal stands league to the Premier League. Technically, you can do that. That just fascinates me how that can happen. And this kind of simulates this too. But the problem is this game is all in. It's 128 euros, which is like $150. And I'm just like, hey, I don't know if I want to do that or not. That's just got so many cool bits though. There's a stadium dice tray. There's double layered player boards, and there's like 5 expansions, and it's just man, I'm so tempted. But November 2022, I don't know. I don't do these kind of things that often. I've done one Kickstarter in my life, and that only was like a 2-month turnaround. So I don't know. Is this something that interests you?
So, very interesting. I mean, I've been hearing about it, but I haven't taken a close look until just a second when you told me to go to GameFound. So, here's what strikes me about it. First of all, the creator is Portal Games. Now, this is Ignacy Cevicek's company, and they're based in Poland, and I generally like some of their games. Notably 51st State Master Set, one of my favorite tableau builder, engine builder games of all time, post-apocalyptic theme. So I have not been generally drawn to the blank manager genre of, this is a board game, but this is a very popular kind of series on the PC, on the Steam or the consoles or whatever, the blank manager game. there's a lot of amazing components, like you called out, like that stadium dice towers, dice tray is amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a 1 to 4 player, and I think if any company and if any designer can be said to have a pedigree of great solo gamer support, I would say that Portal Games and Ignazi are right up there. So those are the interesting things for me about this. I will mention one more thing. Back in the day when I used to play NBA Live. So these are like basketball simulations on consoles, and we're going to
Right.
many, many years back. One of the things that I used to do was play in season mode or even multi-season mode, where you're not really. I mean, yes, you can play the games if you want, but more often than not, what you're doing is you're acting as kind of like the manager, so the front office, and you're building your roster, you're making trades. You're operating at that level. You're not operating at the level of the individual players on the court, and you're not thinking on the terms of the individual games. You're rather thinking in terms of an 82 game season. And you want to kind of make moves, and you got to deal with injuries, and you got to deal with like budget and all this stuff. So yeah, economic simulation, right? And then based on that, you want to optimize all these tweak these little things and see how many games you can win in a season, and can you do better than last season? And those are the kinds of things you're looking for. And I think based on what I'm reading here, this is the same kind of level that this 11 game wants you to think at. So that's kind of cool. I've been staying away from like crowdfunding in for a lot of reasons recently. um,
Hmm.
I won't mention all of them, but one of them is just like I'm super impatient. Like I've been burned
Yeah.
before in that
Yeah.
um, I will back something and then it will finally get into my hands so much later that I change as a gamer. And then when it arrives, I'm no longer excited about it. It's like, what was I thinking?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I spent how
so
much for this?
yeah, right. So
Okay.
yeah. So but that's one reason. There's other, but I won't get into it. But yeah, so I'm trying to stay away from the crowdfunding right now. But anyway, thanks for putting that on my radar.
Yeah, no problem. I think I'll wait for retail myself, but I'm so tempted. But anyway, moving on. There's
Yeah.
other games to talk about here. So
Well,
what's next?
well,
Sorry.
there's like we talked right before we went on the air. We said there's like 9 items on tablefor1.me on Friedrich's
Indeed.
site. I don't think we should go through all of them, but like as we look at them, well, what leaps out at you to talk about a little bit more?
Well, the first one that I'm going back through here again. I got to be honest. The first one that does is that GI Joe deck building
Okay,
game.
let's talk about that a little more. I'm going to click into it. Why
Stop it.
is this why is this leaping out at you?
Well, it's GI Joe. I love to hate that cartoon from the '80s. It was so terrible.
Uh,
The action figures, I played with those when I was when I was a very young kid in the early '80s. It was just, wow, I want to get a Hiss tank, man, but it's like $20, and back then that's a lot of money, and you're just like saving your dimes and nickels to try to buy these toys. um,
yeah,
the art looks pretty cool too. It looks like it's a 1 to 4 player cooperative game designed by T.C. Perry III, based on the
Petty.
hugely popular Petty. I'm sorry,
TC Petty.
Petty. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
so sorry. I looked at that wrong.
that's all.
But based on the hugely popular cartoon show from the 1980s, players will take on the role of GI Joe, team leaders tasked with thwarting the plans of the nefarious Cobra organization. Okay, just having read that, I get it. I mean, you're playing as GI Joe. I would have liked to maybe play as Cobra too. That might have been interesting. Maybe make them not quite as incompetent as they are in the cartoon.
Maybe in the expansion you get to flip the script and play as Cobra.
Oh well, that's a good point. Yeah, that's
There's no
very true.
expansion. I'm making it up right now, folks. The base game hasn't even come out yet. Scheduled for retail release October 2021. So that is next month.
Yep, it sure is. Wow.
I will have to confess that I did not grow up here in the United States. I grew up in the Philippines. We did not really have GI Joe. So I don't have any emotional attachment to this theme. I'm sorry to say.
That's okay. That's quite all right.
Now, that said, it is a co op deck building game, just like my favorite deck building game of all time, which is Aeon's End. So that seems very familiar to me. Like, I look at this and I'm like, I'm not going to have any problem learning and playing this game. I'm probably going to like it. Um, I'll tell you the biggest thing that's kind of holding me back from buying into this is there is, I don't know if you're aware of it, there's another game that's been out for a couple of years from an indie design group called Venom Assault. Are you familiar with that one?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but no, I can't say that I can off the top of my head.
So basically, it is GI Joe without having the GI Joe franchise, but it
Oh,
is
huh.
a co-op deck building game. It basically is this game. The only difference is that this game has the GI Joe franchise. So if you're super connected to the actual GI Joe characters, then this game is for you. Otherwise, a very well regarded and good co-op deck building game of this theme has already been out for a couple of years. I actually owned it for a hot minute, and then it didn't grab me because of my lack of connection, my lack of emotional connection to the theme. So I sold it on, and that's how I feel. So yeah, I'm not quite as jazzed about this as you are, but hey, I'm glad that you are.
Well, we'll see if I'm jazzed. I don't know that I'm jazzed enough to buy it. It just kind of jumped out at me because like, ooh, GI Joe. Let's take a look at that. Ooh, well, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
All
I
right.
go through spurts in my game buying, and I've gone through a spurt for sure, and I think I'm good for a few months. To be honest, we'll see.
All right.
Anyway, what's grabbing you?
So the thing that's grabbing me is the latest item called the Phantom card game. This is the Terror in Mawitan first expansion to the Phantom card game from publisher Games. So the designer of this is a gentleman named Mikhail Lick. And so this game started life. I first learned of the Phantom card game because it was a print and play. As
Hmm.
many, and I was again kind of like I was familiar with the Phantom, kind of 1920s 30s pulp hero in the same vein as your Doc Savage or the Shadow or those types of things, from way
Right.
back. So it's got kind of like that nostalgia feel. The Ghost Who Walks, I think, is the kind of tagline for the Phantom, right? He's the ghost who walks.
Mhm.
So thematically, it grabbed me. And again, solo cooperative deck building game. So these are very common things that I get into, right? And so
Mhm.
anyway, he's got an expansion that's coming up. So that's kind of cool. I sadly have not actually played the original or the base game. But this is something that I'm. If you ask me, Martin, what would you be more likely to pick up? Would you be more likely to pick up the GI Joe co-op deck building game or the Phantom co-op deck building game? I'd be a little bit more likely to pick this one up. So that's what leaps out at me.
Cool. Very
All
good.
right, yeah. Last one, Michael.
Looking
Make,
at.
make it a good one.
Well, I'm looking at Lords of Ragnarok more than anything because it said, "Oh, that's kind of an interesting subject for me," and then it said "Solo Mode" by David Turczi,
Okay.
and I'm like, "Hey, I said the name right too! Yay!" Anyway,
Woohoo!
this is diving into it a little bit more. It says it's by or Awaken Realms, I should say, publisher of Nemesis,
Yeah.
which is a game near and dear to my heart right now. So I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, that
You've
looks pretty
actually
good.
did you play Nemesis already?
I've gotten it on the table and I pushed it around a little bit. I have not played a full game though. That's the thing. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to get back to that. I can get back to that because it's like Alien, man. It's
Yeah.
cool. So this, let's see, it is announced an upcoming crowdfunding campaign. Crowdfunding for Lords of Ragnarok, a long rumored and anticipated spiritual successor to Lords of Hellas from 2018. The game has 1 to 4 players, designed by author Adam Kwapinski,
Yeah.
and 1 to 4 players vying for dominance over the frozen tundras of Norse mythology, albeit with a sprinkle of science fiction added for good measure. So that's kind of pokes a few buttons for
Mhm.
me. That sounds kind of interesting.
Okay.
The mini that they've got featured here looks pretty freaking cool.
Right.
I have no idea how big that is, but just looking at that makes me think of the minis from the latest Descent. I came so close to buying that game. I actually had it on hold, but I decided against it because it was crazy expensive. But that just it makes me think this is probably going to be about that too. It's going to probably be north of $100. I'm just guessing. I could be wrong, but the theme is cool. I like the Ragnarok. I like the Norse mythology elements, and being a solo mode designed by David.
David. Yes.
Where am I getting Alan from? Sorry, David Turchi. Yeah, that is very very appealing to me. How about you?
I mean, it's kind of challenging now to find a solo mode in, recent solo games that hasn't been designed by David Turchi. He's all over the place.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, justifiably so. The man does know his stuff. Okay, so I, again, have to say, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer here, but I'm not quite as jazzed as you looking at this. I wasn't quite as jazzed. I mean, first of all, I've not played any of these games. I've not played Lords of Hellas, Nemesis, Tainted Grail. I don't know. On paper, these are the types of things that I should be into, but not so much. I don't think I have any Norse mythology themed games in my collection at all. So the theme isn't doing that much for me. And I'm also traditionally not that big of a fan of miniatures heavy games. So, and I realize that puts me on the outside of a lot of folks nowadays. Nowadays kind of grim dark theme, kind of vaguely Norse mythology or like whatever, Greek mythology. And then you put a lot of, really nicely sculpted miniatures out there and you put it on the crowdfunding, and that's going to make a lot of money. I mean, almost certainly. I'm just not. I'm just not. Someone who jumps. These are not buttons that automatically make me back something. So sorry to have to say that. I think we lost like thousands of subscribers right now just by what I just said. So I apologize for that, Michael. What are you going to do? You're stuck with me.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I probably lost a couple hundred as soon as I mentioned the word Stalingrad earlier, so we'll see who's listening still. I didn't go into detail on that, though. I just want to make sure if anybody wants us to cover those kind of games more in depth, please let me know. I'm happy to do that. But for now, I'll spare you. That's all right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think this works well is we both got very differing tastes when it comes to games. I think they overlap to a certain extent, though, and it's becoming more and more of an overlap as time goes by.
The Venn diagrams, the area of overlap is getting larger.
Very true.
Very true. All right. I guess that was news for this episode.
That was news for this episode. So I guess maybe we're at 52 minutes.
We haven't talked about the game yet.
We have not talked about the game that is in the title of this very podcast. But hey, so we could do that now, I guess. I guess we could take a couple of minutes to talk about it.
Why not? Why not?
So, oh well. Alien, it's a good game. All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later. This has been this. No, I'm just kidding.
That's it. That's the review.
Right, yeah. And I'm sure, so just for y'all's benefit, this is Alien Fate of the Nostromo, a game that just came out this year, actually, and we both purchased it. We did not receive it for a review copy.
Yes.
And we were both that stoked about it. I mean, it's got Alien in the title, and we're just like, okay, gimme. And that's how I was about it. I kept looking at I bought it pre-ordered from Target, and I kept looking at it every day to see where it was. And but the thing is, it's funny because even despite the fact that I had a little misgiving about the game just right out the gate, because it's based on the first Alien movie, which came out in 77, 79, something like that.
79.
Right. So that was a groundbreaking movie for the horror genre, especially sci-fi horror. And it's beloved. I mean, we both love it to death. But to me, it's like, okay, how? And I've heard so many times that this game was compared to Horrified. So I thought, okay, how can you turn something so horrific as Alien into a family board game? It's got to miss something somewhere in the translation, right? It's always just braced for something like that happening.
Yeah, I didn't think about that they turned it into a family weight board game.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's for ages 12 and up or something like that. I don't remember what the box says. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't see it. I don't see it on the box right
ages
there. But
10 and up.
yeah, 10 and up. Oh, man. Yeah, see, I don't think I would want a 10-year-old watching Alien, but, that's the way it goes. This game, just to be
Well,
clear, is nothing like the movie, though. I mean, it is in the tension, but there's no
yeah,
crazy violence or anything like that. And it actually mitigates that pretty well. At least in my opinion. It's still a little weird. It takes a
yeah.
little getting used to, but yeah,
Well,
overall, it's not bad.
yeah, overall. Well, why don't we describe the game first, right? So, Alien: Fate of the Nostromo is a cooperative game. All players win or lose together. It's for 1 to 5 players. Like I mentioned earlier, it is for ages 10 and up, and it takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play a game. Once you are, pretty familiar with the rules, which are pretty straightforward for the most part, they're not too hard to get into. So essentially, in this game, if you're playing it solo, then you're going to play with, I think it's you can play with as many characters as you want. Michael, how many characters did you play it with?
I played it with all of them. I haven't played
Yeah,
it. I've always played it with all 5.
I played it with 3, and then I played it with 4. But basically, you're playing one of the 5 surviving crew members of the Nostromo from the first movie. So you're playing as Ripley or Dallas or Lambert or Parker or Brett. I think I got
Right.
that right. And
Right.
each one of them, and by the way, the cards of the player cards have these really nice big paintings of those characters that are like paintings of um, iconic images of those characters from the film. So that's a
Right.
really nice plus there. That the art is very cool, and each character has their own kind of unique ability. So on your turn, you can do as many actions as your character is allowed, and some characters are allowed 4 actions. Like Ripley has definitely 4 actions. And that's kind of her ability, right? And then I think Brett is an engineer, so he's really good at crafting things. Like he's better at like making needed equipment out of junk, if I'm not horribly mistaken, right? I
Right.
don't have their cards in front of me, but anyway, so that you get the idea, right? Like you've got characters and they have unique abilities, and so on your turn, you can take up to 4 actions. You don't have to take them all, but that's how many actions you have to take. And you could move, from one space to another on the board. You could pick up an item. You could drop an item. You can use an item. So there's about 6 different items in the game that you can pick up, and they each have an ability. Like a flashlight will push the alien back a little bit. Let's say you've got like a torch, and that. So they all have these different items that you can pick up, and they have different beneficial effects. And there's also, anyway, we'll get to that. You can craft things, like I said earlier. Like as you move through the ship, you're going to pick up kind of metal scrap, and then you can, if you have enough of them, you can craft them together and get an item. And you can also trade. Like if you happen to be in the same space with another one of your crew members, you could exchange items. So those are basically your menu of actions. So so you're basically moving, and what you're doing is at the start of the game, you draw these mission cards, right? Are they called mission cards, Michael? Yeah, they are called
Objectives.
objective cards, right?
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
draw you draw as many objectives as the number of your characters in the game plus 1. So if you're playing all 5 characters, then you'll have to complete 6 objectives, and they generally involve, hey, get this piece of equipment and bring it to this room. And by the way, I should mention here that the first time I played it, I thought you had to take that equipment, take it to this room, and then drop it there, and then all of a sudden you don't have that equipment anymore. I thought that was what it meant, but actually I was like making it too hard on myself. Let's say you've got the flamethrower. Well, you don't have to leave the flamethrower there. You just have to. You basically, to complete the mission is, hey, if it's take the flamethrower to this room, go to the room with the flamethrower, and then you've completed the mission. That's, you know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
I,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I was actually playing it, making it harder on myself. But basically, you have to complete all of your missions, all of your like submissions, whatever, or objectives. Sorry, and then that allows you to flip over the final mission for that game. So it's been hidden all this time. You get to reveal it after you've completed all of your objectives. And then you read what the final mission says, and then you have to satisfy all of its requirements to be able to win the game. All the while you're trying to do all this stuff, the alien is just popping up, and the alien is unfair. The alien has the ability to travel through the ductwork and the walls of the ship, and you would think that you might have. This is very, very close to the way the movie feels, right? Where you might think the alien is many spaces away from you and you're safe, quote unquote, for now. And then you enter a room and you flip over a tile and all of a sudden it says, nope, the alien's here. And you're like, ah! And then at that point, when you encounter, quote unquote, the alien, you run. You have no choice. You have to run at least 3 spaces away. The one thing is you control the direction in which you run, so that you could turn that to your benefit, right? It's like, I can run 3 spaces closer to my actual objective right now. You know what I mean? So and then the last thing I'll mention is, so you've got this morale track. So one of the differences from the movie is, generally speaking, in the movie, if you encounter the alien, that was it. There was no more you die. Right? In this game, when you encounter the alien, you get so freaked out that you run away. But what it does is you've got this morale track. And if you're playing with up to 3 players, your morale starts at 15. If you're playing with all 5 players, your morale starts at 20. But every time you encounter the alien, you lose morale. Or there are events in the game that cause you to lose morale. And if your team morale ever reaches 0, then you die. So that's basically how you lose the game. And I believe, Michael, help me remember this one. I think there's also a rule that if you haven't completed all your objectives and one of your characters dies, that also ends the game prematurely. Or am I totally confused on that?
If I remember right, excuse me, if I remember right, then when the moral track reaches 0, then everybody loses the game.
Right. That's how I'm looking at right here. Crew. There's 2 ways to lose the game. Crew morale failure. As the crew encounters the alien in other situations, they gain and lose morale. If the crew morale track reaches 0, they have run out of hope and cease to function. Or there's a self-destruct. The Nostromo self-destruct sequence may be activated by a final mission card. If the self-destruct track reaches 4 counters, the ship is immediately destroyed. And that's also very thematic to the film. Like, what is it? You now have 2 minutes to reach minimum safe distance.
Yes.
That was Mother's voice, right?
Yes.
The computer, yeah. So,
yeah, it sure was.
So that pretty much. I mean, did I miss anything in that kind of? I'm trying to summarize the game as best as possible, Michael.
No, I don't think so. Although I did play it a little differently for the end scenes. I got a great amount of enjoyment out of it. Where when the morale track gets to a point where if the alien attacks again a character and that would cause it to drop below 0, instead I eliminate that player.
Okay,
and then they're done. They're out of the picture. So that actually makes the game. It feels like it's moving a little bit faster to a conclusion that way. And whoever's eliminated, even if you're playing 5 players, I played it solo, so I'm not sure, but I would think that they're not going to be sitting there twiddling their thumbs for too long, because this thing's coming after them and they got to move quickly to try to finish their objectives and then the final objective before they can win the game. The first time I played it like that, I played all 5 characters. All 4 of them were eliminated. Ripley was the last one. It just happened to work out that way, and she had the final objective card that was to escape the Nostromo in the shuttle.
Perfect.
And she managed to get in there with what she needed, with the alien about 3 spaces away from her. So very close to the movie. I was really shocked at how well that played out. It was greatly enjoyable, and so you hit all the nails on the head. And one thing I wanted to mention too about it, when you open the box. It was kind of weird. I took the box top off and I didn't look. I just put it over to the side and then I turned back and then I'm seeing this cat going hiss. That freaked me out for about half a second.
Yeah, no, and that was intentional, right? It's like
Right? Yeah, yeah.
one of the quarters of the game board is this huge portrait of the cat hissing at you, and they
Right.
intentionally make it so that it's after you remove the rule book, the box top and the rule book, it's the first thing you see, and it makes
Right.
you jump out of your skin.
Yep. Yep.
Which is
That's like
super intentional. I'm like, that was a really nice
right.
touch.
That's like that reminded me of the scene where Brett is eliminated in the movie. I'll just say it that way. He's looking for the cat, and he goes into that storage room, and the cat's there, and he's like, "Come here, cat!" It just kind of hisses and starts growling and backing up, and that's when the alien appears behind him, and that's that. So that just freaked me out. Like it's not maybe hissing at you, but hissing at something behind you. you know. So yeah, that was great, and I think I mentioned that on BGG, and I believe the designer actually replied back, "I'm sorry that scared you," something in like that. That was kind of funny. But yeah, I like the components. The alien itself, I don't like too much. He leans to the side, and
yeah.
Other than that,
Let's talk a little bit more about the components here, because you've got some miniatures. And they're all different colors of your crew and the alien. And you said that your alien is leaning over a little bit.
Yeah, and I saw that some other people were complaining about it too. That even putting it in warm water doesn't fix it quite right.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they're basically just army men quality, just like one step up above army men, right? Like they're not great miniatures. So yeah.
I'd say the alien is like that. The crew miniatures are much better, I think, but the alien miniatures, alien miniature rather, is not the greatest.
Well, I think it has to do with just like the points of contact between the alien and its base are just a tiny spot, whereas the poses of the other crew members, they have more points of contact. They're more stable. So you've got those little miniatures, and then you've got a little alien standee, which is your morale marker. You've also got a little standee of Ash, the synthetic humanoid from the movie. And we haven't talked about this yet. There is actually a harder mode that if you want a more challenge, you can add Ash to the game. So there are Ash cards in the encounter cards. If you're just playing normally, they don't do much for you, or against you rather. But if you are playing with the Ash mode, then it makes the game harder. So Ash is another thing you have to deal with. So, but they're standees. They're just like a little cardboard with a little base. And then you've got like some tokens. You've got these what do you call those tokens that you kind of flip over and they tell you what to find? They are called concealed tokens.
There you go.
Yeah. And then you've also got scrap tokens. So those are the two things that you kind of. Oh, and you have like the little coolant. So coolant is something you can pick up, and some objectives tell you to move coolant other places, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So these are all like standard like cardboard shits. And then you've got different sizes of cards for your encounter cards and your final mission and your objectives, and they're all super standard. So I will say this: look, don't expect to be blown away overall by the component quality, but for a $30 game, it's not bad. It's pretty darn good. What do you think?
That's very true. Yeah, for the price, it's really outstanding. It kind of kills me too that some of these games have such good quality for the price. Like even Horrified comes to mind. I mean, the game is what, $21 right now online, and it's really good components for the price. I mean, $30 for this, it's good. It's thematic. It uses a lot of the same design features that you expect to see from the movie. The ship itself on the board is a little weird, but you get used to it pretty quick. I when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, it's not quite. I guess that's me. The literal side of my mind is trying to say, oh, this should be look like a ship. It should be. It should be.
It doesn't look like the Nostromo. It purports to be kind of like a what do you call that? A split view or a
two decks.
But it's not.
Right, exactly, yeah.
They have to take liberties for gameplay.
Right. And another thing that I thought almost immediately about this game that might be an improvement, or maybe not an improvement, but just a different way of enjoying it, is if somebody created an app that had hidden movement with the alien.
Yeah.
So it's not on the board. That would be I think that would be pretty easy to program, but I'm just thinking that would be even, especially if you're playing it solo or even co-op. If you've got other players, you pull out the app on your phone or whatever, and if it's close, maybe you hear the skittering in the ducts. Like I don't know if you played Alien Isolation,
no,
a PC game. There's a lot of audio cues that prompt you to, hey, you need to hide because it's coming, something like that. Or I don't know that you can really necessarily do something about that. Maybe that's not a great idea because, you're still having to do what you need to do, gather scrap, create weapons and equipment, get the canisters, complete objectives. And the alien is just kind of thrown into the mix to make sure that becomes difficult.
Yes.
And to also make sure that you're on a timer because you don't have forever to do all this. So
Right. So what did you think about the rules and learning the rules?
I don't remember having a hard time with the rules at all as I was going through it. I think I refer to it quite often. My copy is a little used, not like, it's just a little wrinkled here and there because for me, like flip. Okay, what's that? Oh yeah, that's that. Okay. I think that I had a little issue interpreting the cards at some point, but it didn't take me very long to figure it out. Like the surprise attack part, there was something about it I can't remember, but I don't think it was anything that really stopped me from enjoying the game. I like the layout. It's very short. It's only 8 pages long. It's full color. It's like about the size. It's smaller than a piece of paper. It's smaller than 8.5 by 11, so it's not huge. And I don't know. I like the rules. They worked for me. I said, it's just a standard getting to know you kind of a thing with the game and going back into it constantly to learn it.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not that not that complicated of a game. It's pretty straightforward, and so the rules kind of mirror that. They don't detract from. They're not the type of rules that make an easy game, which should be an easy game, harder to learn. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And I kind of agree with you. Learning the basic turn sequence and all this stuff was fine. There's a little bit of ambiguity, I would say, in terms of, for example, like what I was saying earlier. It's like it wasn't really clear to me at first when I first played it about like, oh, okay, so the objective card tells you to take, item X and bring it to this area. It doesn't like kind of put the bow on it and say, and by the way, once you arrive at that area with the item, you've completed the objective. You don't have to leave it there. You know what I mean? So I think there's a little bit of room for, clearing up ambiguity in the rules in that sense, which to me speaks of like those are the types of things you fix with playtesting. You know what I mean? It's like you just
absolutely.
play test, and then you those are the kind of like small things that you pick up that kind of you don't see them as the game designer or as the team working on the game, but you do see them if you've had enough play testing. So, but this is not to say I'm not saying at all that hey, this game hasn't been play tested. It doesn't feel that way at all. It's a pretty polished and straightforward game design. So the rules, if I had to grade the rules out of 100, I would probably give them a grade of 75. They are
harsh.
Harsh? No.
That's right.
You and I are pretty demanding about rules.
Yeah,
But like, big picture takeaway. They are sufficient, and you will be able to learn this game pretty quickly, and you will be able to play it after about a couple of times. If you're like most people, you're not going to have any errors at all.
Right. Yeah. Same for me. I played it a few times. I think I screwed up the rules the first time, but that's to be expected. You learn that way. Especially, it's good to mess things up because then you're like, oh, that's what I was doing wrong. That's why that was so easy. So another good way to tell how busy the rules are or how much of a problem they are is just look on the Board Game Geek page and see how many rules threads there are. There's 46 in the rules section for this particular game, which is a little high, I think, for a game that's only been out about a month, but it's still,
it's not nothing.
No, it's not exactly. So there's also errata too. I think the cost of the motion tracker was incorrect. I believe it says 3 on the player aid, but it was only 2
Okay.
I think something like that. So that's just issues like that. That's like, well, that could have been caught before it went to print. I get why, because we're
Yeah.
human and things happen. But remembering that especially when you're learning the game, oh, it costs 3. Oh, wait a second, no, it only costs 2. Wait, what? Flip, flip, flip. I can't. I don't like that kind of thing. So I could see 75. I'd say maybe 80 tops.
Ooh,
But yeah, that's not bad. Not that I think
very,
about
very,
it.
very generous of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's shift over to gameplay impressions. Michael, what stood out about the gameplay for you?
Uh, well, like I said, I thought it would be a challenge to figure out how you're going to turn this into a family type of game. And at first, I was a little skeptical, even though it was an insta buy for me. But I got it to the table immediately as soon as I got it. Surprise, surprise. And it really did it well, I thought, what it's tried to do. So you're starting everybody in the crew area, whatever that eating area is that they start
The
at.
the mess hall?
The mess hall, maybe that's where. Oh, good, my dog's going off. Anyway,
That's all
uh,
right.
yeah, the mess hall. So that they're all starting there, and I think part of the learning curve was playing it solo is trying to remember all 5 crews' little special actions and also how many actions they have, because I think Brett has 3.
Yeah.
Everybody else has 4 except for the captain, who has 5, and he doesn't have a special action. He just has 5
Right.
actions, so that's pretty useful.
Right.
So you're trying to wrap your head around how to do this, and it was an enjoyable brain tickler, as you would say from earlier, to get that right. And the way the game just would generate scrap, generate the encounter tokens, generate the objectives randomly. It was a fun experience, and it made it different every time you played it. Just because you're still on the ship, you're still avoiding the alien as best you can. You're still trying to build things, but specifically what you have to do changes. So, oh no, I got to go all the way across the ship to get to this, to do that, and nobody else is near there. And or I've got this special ability that can help make this happen and make it happen more easily. It's just this dynamic that's going on in my head, and I can't imagine with a group of players. It's probably even more enjoyable because it's like, well, you go to the maintenance area and you get the scraps so we can build the flamer. No, you do it. I'm not going down there. That kind of a thing.
Right.
So yeah, I had a good time with it. I enjoyed it, and I would play it again for sure. How about you, Martin?
Yeah, well, it gets you into these the fact that there's a board, and the fact that there's spaces, and the fact that there's this alien that's moving around there, and could show up anywhere. It does get you into these, situations, spatial situations on the board where you're kind of like, okay, well, my current objective I need to go there, but I know there's an alien between me and there, or there is a concealed token that I'm going to pass through, and that could potentially, there's a risk, there's a, that could pop up the alien, or it could be nothing, which I like that. Kind of like there's, like you're going to flip it over and there's a whatever percentage chance that it could be the alien. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit, they do that does a nice job of reproducing the tension and the suspense of the movie, because that's really what the first movie was. It was a suspense film. It wasn't so much an action movie, right? Like the second one. So I thought they did a good job there with the game design. And I think that there's a good bit of replayability here, because there are 5 or 6 different final objective cards or final mission cards, right? So you could play this all like at least half a dozen times, and then have a different final mission to do, and as well, you don't, like, you set out the objective cards randomly, you shuffle them, and then you set them out randomly for each game, fresh for each game, and then you put the rest back in the box. So potentially you could be playing with a different mix of objectives every time you play. So I think there's a good bit of replayability here. There's a good bit of they just consider these things in the game design, and they're really thought about how are we going to thematically bring this theme to life in board game form, but yet not be too rules heavy. And I think overall the game succeeds. I will say this, because I've also played Horrified. Have you played Horrified, Michael?
Oh yes, I sure have.
So the comparisons to Horrified, like people like to shorthand this and say, "Oh yeah, it's Horrified with an alien skin," and I'm going to push back on that a little. I don't think. Um, uh, because of the way items are handled, I think Horrified handles items in a way that's less interesting to me. Basically, the items are just all spread out around the map, and they're all color coded. And then, based on the monster you're trying to, defeat, they will need a certain number of red items and a certain number of yellow items and a certain number of blue items. So you're basically just running around the map collecting items, and then all these monsters are getting in your way. So whereas I think the way items are used and generated here, like you mentioned, is a little bit more thematic and a little bit more interesting. So from that perspective, I will say that I like this game more than Horrified. However, I will also say that I think the Horrified monster, like how you defeat them, there's more ways and they're more creative out of the box. You know what I mean? Like I think, yeah, I just think that there's more kind of tactile creativity in terms of how you defeat Dracula or how you defeat the Mummy, and they provide more gameplay variation than the final objective cards or final mission cards in this game. So there's ways in which Horrified is a better game for me, but there's also ways in which this game is a better game for me. But I definitely like this theme more than Horrified. So I will say that about the gameplay.
Right, for sure. Yeah, the Horrified, I'd push back on that as well. It's a totally different game. I mean, you're talking about B movie horror from the 50s and 60s as opposed to something a little more modern. Even though it came out in '79, it's still pretty modern compared to that. This kind of movie is truly terrifying even today. Back in the day, watching The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, Wolfman, those were probably extremely scary movies to 50s movie-going audiences. But today, I don't know that it really translates. So
they're more campy.
What's that?
They're more campy.
Yes, exactly. So playing Horrified feels like a campy experience as opposed to Alien, which is a little more of a horror game. Yeah, to me, it's more of what Horrified should be. I think. Horrified, don't get me wrong; it does what it does great, but this is a little more fascinating to me. So if you're of the same mindset, you'll probably enjoy this a lot better than Horrified.
It feels more claustrophobic, which is one of the other pieces of Alien.
Exactly.
So who's going to enjoy this game? Is it really the horror game for the whole family?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. At 10 years old, yeah, I think so. As long if the kid hasn't seen the movie and doesn't have nightmares for the rest of their lives. I mean, I think I saw the movie for the first time when I was 12, and I had terrible nightmares for a few years after that. Not like all the time, but still, it was like, I don't know, the kid should watch the movie. But the game, being the game, all you're seeing is this boogeyman, the strange banana head boogeyman coming after you. I think it's a pretty decent game. I don't know that 10-year-olds should play it. Maybe you should go a little bit older than that, maybe 12, 13, in my opinion, as an adult and as a parent. But it's up to y'all if you're going to play with your kids.
Yeah. I probably, if my, back in the day when my kids were around that age, and if they wanted to play, I could see us happen. I could see us doing it, but yes, it's up to you. Your kids, but it is a family weight game. Like it's not. It's easy to teach. It's easy. The turn sequence is very straightforward. And it's a co-op game, so it's a good time, is what it is. It's a good time.
Right.
I will say this: let's not escape the gameplay and move on without putting on our critic hats and saying, I don't think it's a perfect game. I think that there is room to say. And by the way, as I say this, I say it with full self-awareness that I also hate it when like critics make this criticism because I think it's lazy. But anyway, I will say it and then we can talk about it. There's a sense in which this game plays itself. There's a sense, I hate that phrase. The game plays itself. There's nothing. It doesn't really give you much agency. And I think I say it this way because basically what you're doing is on your turn, you're flipping over an objective card, and then you are trying to complete that objective. And all the other characters are trying to complete their objectives too. And then the alien shows up, and then you have to react to the alien. It'll make you run away, and then you have choices in terms of what direction are you going to run away. But no matter what, you're going to have to run 3 spaces away, and then see what situation that puts you in. You know what I mean? And then finally, when you finally complete your objectives and you reveal the final mission card, well, you have to, accomplish everything on the mission card to win. So, in a sense, and we can just put this out there. This game is on rails. There's very little player agency. What do you have to say about that, Michael?
That's a interesting perspective. Yeah, I really didn't think about it until you said that. That there are games that are like that. There are games that are on rails, and that's another epiphany I had at one point in my gaming career about games that do that, such as war games like Target for Today or Picket Duty or B-17 Queen of the Skies, where you're just the only decisions you really make are what names do I give the crew. I put my names on my friends in here. Hey, so-and-so's the pilot, so-and-so's the navigator, whatever. And then you just roll on tables after that. So you roll to see where you move. You roll to see if you have encounters. You roll to see if they hit you. You roll to see where they hit you, et cetera, et cetera. It's all rails. But it's still kind of a narrative generator in that regard. So this game is especially that case. You're still telling your story. Like that outcome that I had when I played the 5 characters and Ripley was the only survivor, that was very satisfying to me. That just happened to play out like that. That was a good narrative. I played another game where everybody was eliminated, and that was an interesting narration as well. Just the fact that you play different objectives each game, and as you said, it's a different game every time. That's very good. It is restrictive in that regard. I do like that you have +1 objectives for the characters. So if you have 3 players, you have 4 objectives. So that helps fix it a little bit. But when you played it a few times, you're going to start seeing the same patterns. You're going to start seeing, I've got to go get the canister. I've got to go do this. All right, I'll go. And when you're playing it solo, there's not room for argument. You're just saying, okay, Brett, you're going to go do this. Parker, you're going to go do this. As opposed to a co-op game where, well, why do I have to do that? Why don't you go do that? I'll go do this, kind of a thing.
Right.
Alpha players could take over too, I think, and that would be kind of a bummer. So, yeah, I'm going off the rails there, but I agree with you. It is on rails to an extent. Yeah, it
is on rails, and some people might say that, well, that's okay. It's okay that it's on rails for me, and other people might say, ugh, it's too restrictive.
There's no decisions, kind of a thing.
Okay, so are you ready to move on to the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Sure, why not? Let's do that.
All right, Michael, what do you think are your good takeaways from this game?
Oh, the entire thematic experience, it's really good. I mean, like you said, the art on the player cards is really, really good. I like the theme, I like the design, I like the fonts. The ship is a little weird, but I got used to that. Like I said earlier, the alien figure is a little weird, but I got used to that as well. I do like the minis for the characters. Overall, it's fantastic components. Mm-hmm. Fantastic experience with that. So the good is definitely, I would put the good into the components, even though there's a issue here and there. I still would say that's very good.
All right.
The gameplay itself, it is on wheels. It is on rails, but it's still a satisfying narrative experience in my opinion, and it's a beloved horror genre as well for me. So that are all good things for me. How about you?
Yeah. So I'll attack it from a slightly different angle. We can never have enough games about this IP. So there's precious few of them, and I will go out on a limb and say that this is my favorite one so far. We've reviewed Another Glorious Day in the Core, and we reviewed that one where the aliens were dice. Remember that one? What was that?
Bug Hunt.
Was that
Bug Hunt?
Bug Hunt. Right. Is that it? This is my favorite one so far of the in this world. So great thematic game set in a favorite IP. If you like this IP, then this is a no-brainer. for you. Also, I will say that the components are fine. And if we're grading it on a curve for $30, you've got great components, as Michael said. Um, they are. I've certainly gotten like games from your retailer or whatever and paid this much or more and had worse components like player boards thin as paper
Yep.
that shall remain nameless, or just super disappointing. I'm not going to mention
Right.
terraforming Mars,
Cough.
Ares Expedition, and those ridiculous paper thin player boards. I'm not mentioning it at all. But
Not at all.
anyway, and the rules are pretty straightforward. They're easy. It's an easy game to learn. It's an easy game to jump into. So those are my good key takeaways from this game. How about the bads, Michael?
Bads. I guess the only thing I could really say, the alien figure is a bad, but it's not a terrible thing. So maybe it's not quite bad. It's maybe more of a missive for good. It's still a nice figure. I still think it's a better figure than another Dorius. Wow. I still think it's a better figure than another Glorious Day in the Core. Those plastic models for that game were such a pain to put together.
Yeah,
but
don't remind me.
Right. I'm still going through flashbacks, man.
You weren't there, man, and you didn't know.
Right, exactly. I'm like you. I think if I had to judge it from the three, it's the best one of the series. It doesn't quite scratch that itch yet, though. I think we're getting closer to that ultimate great alien themed board game. And that's alien themed. I'm not talking like Nemesis or something similar in a similar vein.
Right.
I can't put my finger quite on it. I don't want to really call it a bad, more of a kind of a thing. It's fun. I'll play it again, but there's still something missing, and I don't know quite what it is. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense because I feel the same way. I totally feel the same way. As for me, the bad takeaways, nitpicky, super nitpicky. There's some slight ambiguity in the rules that could be cleared up. As Michael mentioned, check out the errata in the BGG page for this game. The rules forum does have like about 40 plus entries right now, so there are some issues there, but they're not deal breakers in my opinion. And I will put on my critic's hat and say that if you are not a fan of games that feel on rails and don't provide you with a heck of a lot of decisions, basically, if you're not willing to go along for a predictable ride, which is what this game provides you, then if you like to have like a lot more player agency and whatever, this game's not for you. I'll say that.
Right.
To me, it's not that big of a deal. It's not a deal breaker, but it is something to consider. Any ugly points, Michael?
No, I don't think so. I think I've voiced pretty much what bothers me about the game so far. Nothing ugly, nothing terrible.
Yeah, same here.
And now, for the stomp of approval.
So we get to the stomp discussion. Michael, the fateful question. Does Alien Fate of the Nostromo deserve the vaunted stomp of approval?
Sure, put that on me right from the start. Okay. No, I it's funny. I didn't even think about that the whole episode. I'm thinking, oh, wait a second. Oh, there's a stomp. Oh, no. Well,
you need that thing we do at the end of every show.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's the Solosaurus thing. Yeah. Okay. Those guys. I mean, us guys. Yeah. That's a really good question. I'm hesitant to give it a stomp, to be honest, just because I don't think it's 100%. It's still satisfying. It's fun to play. Oh, man. I hate to be wishy-washy about it. I sound like I don't like the game, and that's not the case. I like it. It's just I'm hesitant to give a stomp to.
Yeah, we've done that before. We've withdrawn the stomp to games that are okay. That's fine.
Yeah, I would say no. Just not. I'd just say it's almost quite there. It's quite there, almost there, but it's not quite. There's going to be one that's just perfect for it. I'm hesitant to give a stomp out just because the game is pretty good. You know, I want to give it because it just blows me out of the water. And
we have to be very selective.
Yeah, I think so. So I'd say no. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to 100% agree with you. It's a decent game. It's a very enjoyable game. I'm a sucker for the IP. I'm like I've said, I've gone out on a limb here and say I prefer this to the other games in this world, in this milieu with these characters. But it's not a stomp game. It's
Nope.
okay.
Yeah.
But to
Okay.
be it's okay, but to be a stomp game, you have to just. We've said this before. You have to really excel in every
Yes.
category,
Yes.
or even if you're not excelling on every single category, you're so just far ahead of the field in one particular category that you've convinced us that you've earned the stomp, which has happened before. So no, this is not a stomp game for me.
So I'll just wing it.
What?
So that'll that'll do it for episode number 82 of the Solosaurus podcast. I am Michael Eckenfels.
And I am a member of the Dice Tower Network. And for even
I am Martin. Yes, I am. I am not Martin. He is Martin. I realized as soon as I said it that I did it out of sequence. That's what happens when you don't have the script in front of you. Whoops.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're part of the Dice Tower Network. For other fun and shenanigans, we invite you to check us out on Facebook. That's probably the easiest place to get us. I do check the email, but I think if you interact with us on Facebook, you get a much faster response.
Yes,
especially if you Facebook message us.
solosauruspodcast@gmail.com and
Exactly.
facebook.com/solosaurus.
Exactly.
We are also on Board Game Geek. You can search for Solosaurus BGG and you'll find our BGG page. And as always, if you would like to sport your very own Solosaurus microbadge, just hit me up on BGG. My handle is at Dr. Henry Armitage. That's at Dr. Henry Armitage, and I will spot you the Geek Gold for your very own Solosaurus microbadge. And before we go, we should say thanks again to Stone Valley Games for being our sponsor. And speaking of Stone Valley Games, Michael, I think that we have a Stone Valley Games giveaway to promote here.
Yes, we do. So Eric over at Stone Valley Games, if you go over to the homepage, stonevalleygames.com, there is a giveaway for 3 post-apocalyptic board games. Mm-hmm. Waste Night, 2nd edition, Post-Human Saga, and the deluxe edition of Moonshiners of the Apocalypse, which sounds pretty awesome. Wow. Well, there we go. One lucky winner will win all 3 games. So there we go. So yeah, those look like really good games. So head over to stonevalleygames.com and fill out your form for your chance to win. And again, you could be anywhere in the world to win this set. So don't hesitate if you're not in the United States. By all means, go for it. And that's all I can think of.
Yeah. So
I'm so off. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's what happens when you're not reading from the outline.
Right. Yeah. I think I can wing this. Nope, you can't. Okay. Sorry about that.
Outro. We just need to put up the outro.
All right.
Who are you?
Well, Who am I? Thank you again. Thank you again for listening to this. I'm losing my mind. I almost said Stone Valley Games podcast. Wow. I'm so tired. Oh, gosh. I haven't slept well the last couple of days. Anyway, thank you again for listening to the Solosaurus podcast, checking us out. We appreciate it. I am, as always, Michael Eckenfels.
And I'm Martin Gonzalez. We'll catch you next time.